Good morning. Today is the 5th day of Tishrei and the 20th of September. We're up to the 4th reading of Ha'azinu. We're going back to Ha'azinu now. And we want to see the end of the last part of the Parsha that we didn't get a chance to do before Rosh Hashanah. And to understand, there's a part of what this song is about. We need to mention that it was considered always to be a very mystical song in the sense that Moses is telling us that everything that is going to happen, he's going to tell us now in this song. So even though he sort of meant literally, in the literal sense, in the plain sense, he meant that this is a type of preparation to know what will happen if you follow God's rules and if you don't. But because of this very special verse where he says, Asher yikra etchem b'acharit hayamim, that what will happen with you at the end of days, so it was always understood to be a type of prophecy that is almost like a condensed form of history. And it wasn't history necessarily in the sense of which nations will rule and what will happen on which date or things like that. Rather, it's looked upon as almost a personal history for each individual. And this was a famous thing that went through the mystical tradition in Judaism and Torah. And it's well known that the Ramban, Nachmanides, talks about this. And Nachmanides lived in the 12th century. He is he just comes on the heels of Maimonides, and he also lived in Spain. And he is considered to be the modern beginning, let's call it, of the mystical tradition of Kabbalah. By his time, Kabbalah was well known enough that there were openly being works written on the topic. And many of the works were written either by his direct students or students of his students of Nachmanides, and he actually had an academy for Kabbalah in Spain. And much of what we have in what we call the pre-Lurianic Kabbalah comes from his academy. So this was a very well-known proposition by the Ramban, by Nachmanides, that the Song of Ha'azinu is some kind of condensed prophecy where every person should be able to find himself. And the story goes that he had a student there whose name was Abner, and he heard this, and he couldn't accept it. He said, it doesn't make sense that something that's 40 verses long, has about 300 words, could somehow be a description of every person's life. That's better than horoscopes even. Horoscopes don't do it in that little, and they only say general things. But Nachmanides insisted with him that this was very personal. It's not a general statement, it's something very personal. It says that this student Abner was very upset at this, and he couldn't accept this. He couldn't, and it caused him to lose faith in the Torah. And at that time in Spain, if you were an intellectual, there were only, and a Jewish intellectual at that, or a scholar, the only other option you had if you wanted to pursue the intellect was to leave Judaism and join the church. And that's what he did. And this Abner, he became a priest. He went into the priesthood, he left Judaism altogether, and he actually became very high-ranking. I don't know if he was a bishop or something like that, but he became a very high-ranking official of the church in Spain. Towards the end of his life, he felt, I guess, it wasn't even the end of his life, it was some Yom Kippur in his middle age. And he felt, like many times people feel about this, that even though they chose the path freely, there's somebody to blame. and I guess he was upset about something. It could be that he wasn't moving ahead as he had liked. We don't know what the reason exactly was. And he didn't exactly invite him, he called upon his former teacher, Nachmanides, who was now a very old man. At the end of his days, Nachmanides moved to the land of Israel, and he's buried in Tiberias. But he was still there in Spain. He was an old man already. And this Abner, he called on him. He called to him, and he forced him to come before him on Yom Kippur. And on Yom Kippur, to show his admonishment, how much he was angry at the Ramban for saying these nonsensical things, like that the name of every person is in this song of Azinu, and the story of every person is there. He took a pig and he slaughtered it in front of the Ramban, and he cooked it and ate it on Yom Kippur. Now, as we'll see in a moment, we're not telling the story for the dramatic effect. Rather, there's a very deep meaning here. And so, Nachmanides watched the whole time in silence. And when Abner had finished, he said to him, I understand that you're very angry at me. What is it? And Abner says, do you know why I'm a bishop now, or whatever he was, and I'm not a scholar of Torah, why I left? It's all your fault. So Nachmanides probably didn't even remember what the story was. And so Abner proceeds to tell him, you once taught us, and you were very adamant about this, that the Song of Azinu contains the life of every individual, and it's only a question of searching and you'll find it there. And this I could not accept. Now you have two options. The one option is to show me that my life is described in this song, and the other option is, I'll kill you. Decide whichever you want. So Nachmanides had no choice. He went to the side and he prayed to God, and he prayed to him to open his eyes to see where in the song was Abner's name. And he found it. He found it in the second letters, the third letters in the verse, which is in today's reading, the fourth reading. I said in my anger, I will destroy them. I will eliminate their memory from humanity. In Hebrew, it's amalti apeihem, ashbita me'enos zicham. In Hebrew, it's just five words. Now, in Avner in Hebrew has 4 letters. So how does this work? That the first, they're in order, Aleph, Bet, Nun, Resh, but before them there's one more word that the Ramban, Nachmanides, also mentioned. He didn't have to mention it because you don't need it. You can just do the 4 words, Apehem, Ashbita, Me'enos Zicham. You could finish with that. He added the word before that, Amalti, because he wanted the extra letter in the beginning. The extra letter in the beginning is a Resh. And a resh before someone's name is when you say he's a rabbi. And so he said this to his former disciple. He said to him, your name, not just your name, but with the title, Rabbi Avner, is in this verse. And what is this verse saying? That I will destroy your memory from humanity. So Avner was shocked. First of all, that he could even find it. But he was even more shocked by the fact that the verse that was describing this was exactly describing his fate, which was that he had left the Jewish people. He was not married. He would not have children. And that was the end of it, of his life. He would be forgotten from humanity. He would leave no mark on humanity. And he broke down crying, and he asked Nachmanides what to do. How could he repent? And he said, fulfill the verse completely. And Abner understood the hint. They say he took a boat and he sailed out into the ocean, into the Atlantic somewhere, and he was never heard from again. But I said that this story is not exactly a story of victory in the regular sense, because the very fact that this story is being told, it has a far more important implication. It's not just that Nachmanides was able to find his name, Abner's name. It's not just that it, in a certain sense, was a premonition of everything that would happen to him. The reason that Abner left wasn't because, in the simple sense, he couldn't accept that the Torah, being God's word, could be so dense that it could hint and have an allusion to every single individual. That wasn't the issue. The issue was a little bit different, and it's much more related to Yom Kippur and why he invited the Nachmanides, his former teacher, on Yom Kippur. What Avner felt is what a lot of people feel. It's that if I lead my life correctly, then I'm part of the Torah. But if I choose to diverge from the path, to do whatever I want, not what God says, then certainly I will be removed, erased from the Torah. Let me say it the way that it was said by Paul. His rationale for annulling the commandments was that if you annul the commandment, meaning you annul the Torah, you annul the punishment. That was his rationale. Meaning, it's the Torah that set up the problem of having a commandment and needing to follow it. And so, the punishment is a result of the commandment in the Torah. If I annul the Torah, I free myself from the commandments, and so from the punishment. So his formula was, I don't want to annul the Torah entirely, I just want to say the commandments are no longer relevant. Since they're no longer relevant, the punishment is no longer relevant. Abner here is capturing the essence of the Christian argument that Paul made. What was the answer that Nachmanides gave him? He said to him, it doesn't matter if you diverge from the path. It doesn't matter if you go somewhere else. It doesn't matter if you try to erase your own memory from the Torah. You're still written in the Torah. The Torah also contains the story of everyone who sins. There's no difference before God. It's still part of the creation. It's still part of the Torah that he wrote. There's no escape, basically, is what he's telling him. There's no way you can escape from the commandments. There's no way you can escape from your covenant with God. You can do whatever you want. You'll still be written and appear in the Song of Azinu. And not only will you be written, not only will your life... Again, he thought that somehow he's now breaking the bank. He's escaping. He's breaking the jail of the Torah. But what ended up happening was that you can't break this jail because it's not a jail. It's a description of reality. And it includes even those paths that diverge from what God supposedly wants from you. Because God knows also the different paths that diverge. They're all part of it. And so this is a beautiful thing to think about before Yom Kippur, as also a preparation for Yom Kippur. That and the transformations that we're trying to go through in these days, that the Torah is the basis for our connection with God. There's no other basis. And as such, I'm always, regardless of where I am, whether I think I'm in a good place or I'm in a bad place, I'm always still part of the plan. I'm always still part and parcel with creation. You can't leave. As the sages say, do everything that the master tells you except for leave. If the master tells you to leave, he's not a master. If the Torah somehow would not include even the paths that diverge and talk about them and give them room and allow for tshuva, allow for return to God, then it wouldn't be the Torah. And that was a beautiful message that Nachmanides sent this former disciple. Thank you very much for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow.